I want to thank Mark Peterson for inviting me to speak at the Macromarketing Doctoral Consortium and our Early Career Scholar program. I'm really sorry I cannot be at the Macromarketing conference in person, but I really wanted to do this presentation because there are no better times for opportunities to do research, significant societally impactful research, than today. And that is because two major institutions, capitalism on the one hand and democracy on the other hand, are under siege. There's a huge popular movement, populism as it is called, in democracy, and people are questioning the relevance of business as an institution. So my presentation will be primarily talking about why capitalism itself needs to serve the society, research opportunities that arise, and more importantly, what factors are leading to this discontent in the marketplace. And where should the discipline focus so that marketing as a discipline itself becomes more respected and admired in the society. So the title of my presentation is Emerging Research Opportunities in Macro Marketing. Here is the context, and here are some observations. Capitalism and democracy, as we know today, are under serious criticism. I would even use the word under siege for not serving the society. This criticism is growing as both the income and, more importantly, wealth disparity is increasing at an alarming rate, almost out of bound, especially on the wealth side. And if you go back to Adam Smith and his writings, it was the wealth of nations, not the income of nations. So it is not the Gini score on income distribution or disparity or variance, but the wealth, and wealth is increasing, more wealth for wealthy people, and people who are struggling to save anything are unable to save. So in many ways, this is a major challenge arising in the society, and I don't see any let-up. If you look at the amount of money billionaires are making, becoming more billionaires, not just in advanced economies, but also in emerging economies, it's just absolutely startling finding. I like Peter Drucker. In fact, his writings were seminal pieces. If there was one thoughtful leader about everything in business and institutions, was Peter Drucker in the last century. And he had several important messages to make for marketing as a discipline. One of the key messages he had was that there are only really two functions of business that create value. The rest of them are just useless or they're cost centers. And the two functions are innovation and marketing. Think about someone who was a journalist originally, wrote practitioner books praising marketing. While society always admires innovation and actually invests in innovation, marketing is blamed for societal problems. Right now you see that Silicon Valley, privacy laws, anything that's blameful, it's marketing problem. Or opioid problem, for example. And of course, the biggest societal problem arising from a number of confluence of events and activities is the obesity. Obesity is a very fundamental issue. It is a chronic problem in the society, arising not just in advanced economies, but also in emerging markets. And then when people attribute that to by us promoting in marketing excessive consumption as opposed to mindful consumption and environmentally unfriendly packages. These are just two examples. One can talk about marketing practices, communication, deceptive advertising, anything you talk about it. Both capitalism and democracy are searching for solutions that will make them more relevant and meaningful, and both respected and admired by the society, and especially by the millennium generation. In fact, the teenager who started the movement in Sweden about climate change is mind-boggling. We thought only at a college level, college students, we will become socially active. This is the Vietnam era, or before Vietnam in many other countries. Political activism was common in higher education, colleges and universities. Now it is in high school. And it's a worldwide movement. I think we have to be very conscious about how society is uneasy and almost at the edge about the relevance of these two institutions. Our focus will be on the business and in marketing and less on democracy. Marketing as a discipline and practice can benefit the society enormously, in my view, if you focus on societal issues. This presentation will suggest where we have excellent research opportunities, as I mentioned before. To me, in marketing, we need to make fundamental shift. Rather than doing research for the corporation and primarily how can we enhance the shareholder value, both balance sheet and income, we need to shift that objective of what we do research as societal or shared value. Michael Porter talked about the shared value. My own book is Forms of Endearment, which has led to conscious capitalism movement. Rashi Sodia and I wrote that book, which is again having an enormous impact on the society by saying that you don't have to limit your focus to shareholder value, but there are 5 stakeholders, and marketing can actually provide, or business can provide, value to all 5 stakeholders, more than just the investors, which is a concept of shared value objective. And rather than taking a business perspective, can we take a societal perspective? Whose lens are we looking at in terms of practice and research? So the current research in marketing is at the lower left. My view is that it needs to move and will move toward the upper right, either in equal dimension or one dimension dominating the other, which would be what I call emerging research opportunities. What is driving this shift? The first major factor is growth of emerging markets. With the rise of China and India, both becoming brand-conscious middle-income families, is creating enormous pressure on society, especially on environment, which I think is a very important consequence as those economies modernize. If that's not enough, China and India, you see the whole rise of Africa now. And Africa is a continent almost hitting about 1 billion population. And if you look at the forecast, it'll be more than about the same size as China and India put together based upon the latest demographic research, let's say by the turn of 2100 or this millennium. As I mentioned, capitalism is under siege. And the third major change that's taking place, which gives us huge opportunities to do research, is digital revolution. I've been amazed how the cell phone has totally revolutionized all economies and especially emerging economies. They are leapfrogging everything. Today, the lead nation in smartphones is not America, is not Europe, maybe Japan, maybe South Korea, but it is China and India. Unthinkable only 20 years ago. The impact of the internet itself is enormous, and internet is nothing but a dumb network for routing and for addressing. Think about a smart internet. Think about all the things we can do going forward. The breakthroughs are coming in digital area more rapidly than we could even imagine. And let alone the biological sciences that are emerging out there. So this whole field of digital revolution is changing the paradigm in the way we look at institutions of capitalism, such as business, and democracy, such as the government. I also believe very strongly that marketing is in a midlife crisis. We did wonderfully well when America was getting industrialized, unbranded consumption, we began to buy more and more branded consumption. Appliances were invented, automobile was invented. So we became very much durable, goods-oriented society. Branding, promoting, marketing, distribution became very key phenomena. And we have done a great job in terms of creating a consumption-led society. But today marketing is in a midlife crisis. It does not know what it wants to do in the future. What is the encore? What is it wants to do down the road? I think it's very important. Therefore, it is looking for a new paradigm. Remember Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shift philosophy of science book, where he advocated that there is always this discontent for a while, lack of identity, some fringe ideas come about and they become mainstream. It's like a spiral that goes on. And I think marketing is at the cusp of that right now. A number of perspectives will come, including macro marketing perspectives, if we do good research in that area. So what are the areas for emerging research opportunities in macro marketing? First one, I think, is all about CSR, adding purpose to the brand, meaning in the consumption of the brand, and what I referred to earlier as conscious capitalism. I think that is one very leading immediate research opportunity. So we have, how do we embed meaning in consumption? If there is one thing common among all packaged goods companies, whether it's Unilever, Nestle, for example, or Procter & Gamble here, they're all saying in our brands and products, can we embed some purpose so that when consumer consumes, they feel good about it, that they are contributing toward the society. So consumption becomes meaningful. Very important one. I have written quite a lot about mindful consumption. I think it is the role of marketers to encourage consumers to be mindful of their consumption, not just in terms of recycling, reuse, reduce consumption, as we call the 3 R's, but much more than that. How can we have a caring consumption? Caring for ourselves, caring for the society or community, and caring for the planet. Caring aspect of consumption is very important to do research on. And the third one, of course, is United Nations Millennium Goals, which more and more corporations are adopting, and governments are also encouraging that, which is triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. I think this whole area is perfectly suited. There is significant amount of research money actually in CSR related activities in marketing. Just to give you how interesting it is, in India, more than 5 years ago, they passed a law, mandatory 2% tax on income tax for the corporations to set aside money for CSR. The amount is staggering. There's a $5 billion cash flow to be tapped into doing research on CSR. Many of the corporations are establishing their own CSR activities, whether it's in employee training, environmental sustainability, or educational institutions. In fact, government just announced last week, due to this flood relief or earthquake relief, one can set aside money just serving the society that way. That is very fascinating. So countries like India and China may actually lead in CSR, even though CSR really began in the Western world either faith-based or just benevolence. Second major area to study is, at a macro level, the impact of modernization on culture and consumption. And that includes the whole future of faith-based consumption. We have the Sharia law in Islamic culture, where things are actually blessed by the faith. So you do have a kosher food in the Jewish tradition, for example, and you have a halal tradition, not limited to edible products. When I did research on halal consumption, I found that whole financing has to be blessed by halal procedures, because it gives you certain mandates of what you can and cannot do when you lend money. And it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Primarily certified by Malaysia on the one hand, or by Iran on the other hand. So there's a whole area of research for each faith, how modernization is impacting the way we consumed faith-based. Faith is basically a norm that provides to consume in a way that is good for you. But here this norm is changing, great area of research. As I mentioned, changing social norms. What is acceptable, what's not acceptable, at a certain time and the place, That's fascinating research. I've studied myself that we are no longer a nation of diners, we are a nation of grazers. We have no time to sit down and eat, either by ourselves or in family. Everybody comes and eats at their own pace, and we eat standing up more and more now, as if eating is a chore rather than something that is meaningful conversation, huge societal issue. We do see the easternization of the world. Rudyard Kipling talked about East is East, West is West, and the twins shall never meet. I think he's dead wrong. He's not only dead, but he's wrong. Have you seen the westernization of Asia, for example? And now we see easternization of the world taking place, especially in spirituality or in fusion music, fusion culture, fusion art, fusion foods. Biggest change. So can we study easternization of the world at a macro level? Third area, very large growing interest worldwide, is marketing to low-income consumers. C.K. Prahlad wrote a book, became a classic, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, BOP. I don't like the word bottom, so I've changed to base of the pyramid. And if you take people below $2 per day income, the total economy is at least $5 trillion and growing faster than the GDP growth of nations. Most of the consumption of that $5 trillion is unbranded consumption, procured through unorganized retailers, street vendors as we will call them. It is just about to change. How can that consumption, basically among the lower income people who have a buying power, can be actually made more affordable to them, more efficient for them, less wasteful, etc., through modern mass production technologies, as we did when America shifted from agriculture to the industrial state. And faith-based channels of distribution and promotion are becoming very important in this segment. The low-income segment is controlled by political, socio, faith-based institutions. And they become channels of distribution. I have not seen too much research in using faith as a channel of distribution, for example. Fourth area that we need to talk about is sustainability. What is the impact of consumption on the environment? In my book, Chindia Rising, for example, which was about rise of China and India as a large consumer economies, I made a main point that it is neither the technology nor the capital that will constrain the growth of China and India, but it will be the environment. Environment will slow them down because we are overutilizing, exploiting environment. Ultimately, environment is all biological, living, breathing organisms developed over thousands of years, whether those are in fact something in the water, for example, or those are all minerals, however you look at it, besides vegetation, animal, etc. And the issue is that when you have anything living, breathing, and you abuse them, they shut down cooperating with you. They don't renew themselves as well. So there's a whole theory behind that one can use to say, how can we coexist with the environment, nurture the environment? More we nurture them, more the environment will give back to us, which is interesting. And I do believe that there will be more and more mandatory deconsumption. There are market failures in consumption, quite a lot we know. Many of the vice products, smoking for example, or alcohol for example, if you leave it to the market, you do get excess consumption, no matter how much rules and regulations you pass, or truth in advertising, truth in packaging, and often all it requires is some sort of a mandatory law that says you are just not allowed to consume. It's also called demarketing by Phil Kotler, who had an excellent article about several marketing roles one can play depending upon market demand. Here it is demarketing. Excessive consumption could be reduced so that sustainability can continue. Next area is social media and society. Not social media of word of mouth communication on a brand or product, but how social media is changing the society. Not studying social media about the word of mouth and consumer experiences for a brand. I'm talking about the impact of social media on the society itself. That's my interest area at a macro level. I find we are all becoming a roommate nation. Everybody comes and eats at their own pace. Even if you are together right after one eating, we all scatter into privacy of our own corners or rooms. Somebody's text messaging, somebody's watching YouTube, we are never together. So we are living like roommates. When a family begins to live like roommates, and there is no neighborhood concept altogether, it becomes what I call a roommate nation. And it has societal consequences, negative side effects, and how do we manage that? For example, loneliness. While we belong to a society, we don't belong at the same time. People are escaping loneliness by going to virtual worlds, creating their own avatar, or Second Life websites, for example, Farmville. I can go on giving you examples. Society is changing enormously. And I find very fascinating that while China and India are the largest in population, the largest nation in the world is what I call Facebook nation. More than 2.5 billion people. They have no jurisdiction of any nation. Truly global, more diverse than anything you ever saw. How does it govern itself from a societal perspective? Fascinating research area. And what will be the role of regulation? Will internet be regulated? Not only should be regulated as a policy, but will it be regulated? And it's very obvious that the rest of the world does not feel or believe in free or cowboy capitalism as we believe, and therefore regulation of the content and the internet will come outside the country. As it is, Europeans have already come out with their own standards for privacy, but Asia is stepping up now. So my view is that regulation will come from outside, and then ultimately we'll have to agree to the same regulatory policies. Number 6, e-commerce, marketplace, and livelihood. While we study entrepreneurship out of sheer passion and excitement, there's a whole another area of entrepreneurship by necessity. In many of the emerging markets, it's sheer survival that creates entrepreneurship, which is why refugees are always more entrepreneurial, because they have to go someplace where they have to survive. They have to innovate. They have to come out with things that we would have never imagined in laboratory. And of course, how can e-commerce be an enabler to create economic livelihood among that base of the pyramid under $2 income people? It is happening in many parts of the world, some in Africa, some in India, some in China, but that's a very interesting area. Number 7, empowering through digital literacy. I think the biggest transformation of the poor that can be made in a society and make it equivalent to rich, in other words, gap between poor and rich, rural and urban, can be reduced significantly by strictly digital literacy. Just as reading and writing was the transition from agriculture to the industrial, today in the post-industrial society, I think digital literacy will bring about more changes, hopefully in language, let's say same language as English, common language, that'll be even better. So public policy and digital literacy are very important. So countries like India are having digital India policy. You see in Kenya, by policy, M-Pesa is the payment system, leapfrogging credit cards, leapfrogging anything like a PC. It is basically on a cell phone based. I'm told 30% of the total economy in Kenya rests on M-Pesa platform, which is surprising. Here is an emerging economy which is far advanced in technology and its use than we are. Ultimately, Earth is flat. Tom Friedman's book is very important to understand, because this poor and the rich nations, emerging economies and advanced economies, digital technology flattens that one out, and comes them closer, and hence we need to think about the impact of society on a global basis. Last area that I think is very key is purpose-driven innovation. Innovation cannot be strictly random, serendipity, for example. Breakthrough for its own sake. I did research on this one at Bell Laboratories many years ago, and I found that 80% of all the R&D spending we do in America, funded by NSF, NIH, or any agency, government, NASA, or university research, is all waste. It is just curiosity. Only 20% is driven where there is a significant commercial application or use which benefits the society. What if we have purpose-driven or mission-driven innovation? In other words, there is a societal problem and you focus on that and provide R&D money, research support, and infrastructure, etc. This would be a very significant change. There is no research on purpose-driven innovation. So, innovation for good. Innovation for better affordability and accessibility. These are mission. Very much like President Kennedy's mission, man on the moon by this time. I think one can do the same thing in the marketing area to focus on what I would call mission-driven or purpose-driven innovation. Sustainability is another area similarly for specific innovation. And of course, we are going to clone Mother Nature. Cloning is the next major platform. Biological sciences will replace mechanical and industrial sciences, both chemistry and physics, surprisingly, and will move toward more and more biological sciences, and cloning and conservation will be two key platforms. Cloning is here. I can clone pearls and do better pearls in a farm than what Mother Nature can do. I can clone a sheep. I can clone shrimp. I can clone any meat. I can clone birds. I can clone chicken. I can clone human beings. Technology is here knocking the door. Of course, you have the moral dilemmas, which again is a great topic for macro marketing. So, I want to conclude by saying that there is no better time to be actually driven by research passion than in the area of macro marketing. I began as a behavioral guy, understanding individual consumers, behavioral and micro. I have now gone more and more toward macro and non-behavioral perspectives, such as policy perspectives, societal perspectives, economic perspectives. Very different from my training. I get very excited even at this age now, even though I'm past 80 years old, I enjoy this work. It makes me learn some newer things, and I think I can contribute toward research agenda of the nation or the society at large. So, to conclude, capitalism is under siege as the income and wealth inequality grow rapidly. In the process, marketing is also under siege and needs to reform as a business function and institution. Marketing, both as a practice and as a discipline, can be respected and admired if it focuses on societal issues and challenges rather than increasing market share of a vice product such as a beer, wine, or consumption of detergents. There is a bigger thing in life to do for us talented young people who have all these brilliant minds. How can these minds be used for societal good purposes than strictly profit motive for mundane products in life? Marketing as a discipline will shift from the shareholder value creation to shared value creation. It will also shift from the business perspective to more and more societal perspectives. Four forces which are driving this shift is the growth of emerging markets and their impact on environment and the society, capitalism under siege, digital revolution, and marketing's midlife crisis. The paradigm shift of marketing as a discipline and practice will generate major research opportunities for early career scholars and doctoral students in marketing. I will not go and summarize the areas which are in the last slide. As we talked about, there are 8 major opportunities for research. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I wish I could be there. This is my passion, and I really am missing a great opportunity. But thank you for inviting me.